At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to two men named Brandon and Zero, who are being held captive on a ship by a group of Mexican mercenaries. Just as they are about to be executed, the two suddenly fight back and take down their captors in a brutal counterattack. But the danger is not over yet. Another group of mercenaries arrives on a separate ship and launches an attack. Brandon tells Zero to find a flare gun while he holds them off. Once Zero gets it, Brandon shoots at an oil tank on the enemy ship. Then he signals Zero to fire the flare, triggering a massive explosion.
Oh, shit!
And in that moment, their war was only just beginning. This is Sniper, no nation. 2 days later, Zero is seen being interrogated by American intelligence. He is asked about Brandon's whereabouts. Zero explains that after the incident on the ship, they were picked up by a rescue helicopter. He returned to the United States, but Brandon disappeared and no one knows where he went. The interrogator then reveals that Brandon is now being hunted by the Prime Minister of Costa Verde because he once killed the Prime Minister's nephew. It turns out that Brandon and Zero were once part of an elite American Special Forces unit called Grid. Now only the two of them remain, as the rest of the team has gone their separate ways. Brandon specializes in long-range sniping, while Zero excels in close combat. Back in the present, since Zero refuses to reveal Brandon's location, he is taken away to an unknown place with his head covered. Not long after, Zero arrives at the location. When the cover is removed, he is shocked to see Brandon's father standing in front of him. His name is Thomas Beckett, a legendary sniper. Thomas asks where his son is, and because it is Brandon's own father asking, Zero finally agrees to take him there. The scene then shifts to the Prime Minister of Costa Verde, a man named Diaz. He announces that he is deploying all his forces to capture Brandon, holding him responsible for his nephew's death. At the same time, the American government is no longer offering Brandon any protection, mainly because his current whereabouts are unknown. On the other side, we are introduced to a mercenary leader named Kruger. Soon after, he is contacted by the Prime Minister's right-hand man and is offered a mission to capture Brandon. Kruger agrees, but only if half of the payment is transferred up front. The offer is accepted without hesitation, and now Kruger and his men officially join the hunt. The story then returns to Brandon, who is hiding out in a secure location. When he hears suspicious noises, he quickly prepares his weapon, but it turns out to be Zero, along with Thomas. Brandon immediately embraces his father, as they have not seen each other in a long time. Thomas explains that he has come to protect Brandon, since the American government is no longer backing him. There are now many people hunting him down under orders from the Prime Minister of Costa Verde. Hearing this, Brandon feels deeply disappointed, especially after everything he has done for his country. Thomas reassures him that ever since the Grid unit disbanded, the government has stopped caring about them. Still, he reminds Brandon that he is not alone and that he will stand by his side no matter what. After that, Zero suggests that they should stay hidden for now until they can come up with a solid plan. Not long after, Brandon reaches out to an old friend who is still active in the military, a man named Jondi. Jondi already knows that Brandon is being hunted, and the news has spread widely. Unfortunately, he apologizes and says he cannot help because he is tied up with another mission, then quickly ends the call. The call is then picked up by Jondi's teammate Angel. It turns out Brandon is also very close to her, even seeing her as family. Angel also apologizes for not being able to help right away, but she promises that once their mission is finished, she and Jondi will come to him. After the call ends, Jondi, as the commander, immediately orders Angel to prepare the team because they are deploying that very night. But before they can even move out, a sudden explosion hits their base. A group of mercenaries storms in and attacks without warning. Within minutes, Jondi's entire team is wiped out. The scene then shifts to Brandon and Zero, who are in the middle of a boxing session. Their training is suddenly interrupted by Manuel, Thomas's assistant. He brings urgent news and shows them CCTV footage from Jondi's base being attacked. In the footage, the mercenary leader removes his mask, revealing himself as Kruger. Before the recording ends, Kruger deliberately sends a message, knowing Brandon would be watching. It becomes clear that Kruger intentionally kept Jondi, Angel, and one of their teammates alive. His real goal is to use them to find Brandon. He then takes the three of them to his base in Costa Verde for interrogation. Seeing this, Brandon refuses to stay idle and immediately proposes a rescue mission. However, Manuel advises him to stay patient and wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, at Kruger's base, the Prime Minister is also present and clearly pleased with the situation. He plans to frame the captives as terrorists and have them executed in 3 days. With that, he would not need to chase Brandon anymore, since Brandon would inevitably come to rescue them. Back on Brandon's side, he and Zero call in 2 former members of the Grid team. These 2 are skilled hackers who have supported many of their past missions. When they arrive, they are warmly welcomed and quickly brought up to speed. At the same time, Kruger begins interrogating Jondi, Angel, and their teammate, trying to force them to reveal Brandon's location. But despite the pressure, they refuse to talk. With no answers, Kruger resorts to torture, determined to break them. The next day, Brandon, Zero, Manuel, and his father gather with the 2 hackers to plan a rescue mission. They begin mapping out how to save Jondi, Angel, and their teammate. During the briefing, the female hacker receives urgent intel that the captives are scheduled to be executed the following night. Hearing this, Zero pushes to act immediately, worried they might be too late. But the male hacker disagrees, pointing out that rushing in would be suicide. That is when Brandon comes up with a different approach. He suggests intercepting Kruger's convoy while the prisoners are being transported to another location. If they strike in a remote area, they can avoid unnecessary risks. This plan finally convinces the team. They start refining the strategy to make sure everything goes smoothly. The female hacker proposes hacking into the convoy's GPS and redirecting it to an isolated route. Brandon and his father will provide sniper support from a distance. Zero will handle close combat on the ground. Meanwhile, Manuel will stay positioned on a rooftop, ready with a helicopter for extraction once the mission is complete. With the plan locked in, they immediately begin preparations. Timing is critical, and they need to be in position before Kruger's convoy passes through the target area. At the same time, the Prime Minister is seen interrogating Jondi alone. To break him mentally, he puts him through a twisted game of Russian roulette. He makes it seem like Jondi has a chance to survive if he gets lucky. The game plays out, and after several attempts, nothing happens. Jondi survives, only to realize it was all a setup. The gun was never loaded. The Prime Minister reveals that he never intended to kill him, as long as Jondi is willing to cooperate. In exchange, he offers freedom and a large sum of money. Faced with the choice, Jondi eventually gives in. He accepts the offer rather than risk a pointless death. After that, he is sent back to his cell. When he returns, Angel tries to check on him, but he says nothing. She tries to lift his spirits, convinced that Brandon and the others will come for them. But Jondi no longer believes it, thinking Brandon has already abandoned them. The next morning, before heading out on the mission, Brandon briefly asks his father to stay behind, considering his age. But his father refuses. Even now, his skills as a sniper remain as sharp as ever. In the end, Brandon trusts him, and together they move out toward the mission location. The story then shifts to Kruger and his men, who are loading Jondi, Angel, and their teammate into a convoy. Before they leave, Kruger makes it clear that they will reach their destination within an hour. He leaves them with a chilling thought, suggesting they should hope for a miracle before their time runs out. As the convoy moves, Brandon's hacker team begins tracking their position in real time. Within moments, they manage to lock onto Kruger's location and prepare to take control of the GPS. Meanwhile, Brandon and the others are already in position, waiting for the signal. Once the system is breached, the convoy is quietly redirected toward a remote route, exactly as planned. With everything in place, the hackers confirm that the convoy will arrive in just a few minutes. Inside the vehicle, Angel still holds on to hope, believing that help is coming. But Jondi seems completely detached, no longer showing any concern for what happens next. Soon enough, the convoy enters the isolated area, right into the trap. Brandon signals his team, and the ambush begins. A fierce firefight breaks out as both sides exchange heavy gunfire. In the chaos, Kruger orders his remaining men to move the prisoners out. During the confusion, Jondi manages to slip away and disappears. Kruger, on the other hand, takes one of the prisoners and retreats into an abandoned warehouse. Angel is left to fight her way out of the vehicle, taking down the mercenaries around her. After breaking free, Angel spots Zero chasing after Kruger. At the same time, Brandon drops down and engages Kruger's right-hand man. The fight is intense and drawn out. But in the end, Brandon manages to take him down. Inside the warehouse, Kruger prepares to eliminate the remaining prisoner, but Zero arrives just in time. A brutal fight follows. And at one point, Zero begins to struggle against him. Luckily, the rescued teammate steps in, turning it into a 2-on-1 battle. Together, they manage to defeat Kruger. Not long after, Angel arrives at the scene, and Zero quickly confirms that the threat has been eliminated. He also assures that Angel and the others are now safe. Meanwhile, Brandon is still searching for Jondi, who vanished during the chaos. As he moves through the area, a vehicle suddenly approaches. Inside, he finds his father along with Jondi. Without hesitation, Brandon gets in, finally feeling a sense of relief as the mission appears to be over. Meanwhile, Zero manages to get Angel and their remaining teammate to the top of a building where Manuel is already waiting with a helicopter. Even so, Zero decides they should not leave yet, insisting they wait for Brandon and his father to arrive. Manuel tries to reach the two hackers to get an update on Brandon's location, but suddenly all communication is lost. The signal is completely cut off, and back at the base, the hackers realize that someone has deliberately sabotaged their connection. At the same time, Brandon and his father are still on the move with Jondi. Along the way, Brandon starts to question where Jondi is taking them. Jondi assures them that he is leading them somewhere safe, but not long after, he suddenly stops at a dead end. Moments later, two vehicles pull up behind them. That is when the truth becomes clear. Before stepping out, Jondi admits that he had no choice but to do this. The vehicles belong to the Prime Minister and his men. It turns out Jondi has been working with Diaz all along, and even the earlier ambush was part of a larger plan. Now completely surrounded, Brandon realizes he only has one bullet left. Tension rises as his father steps in, calming him down and asking for the weapon. Trusting him, Brandon hands it over. The two of them step out of the vehicle, and without hesitation, his father takes the shot, aiming straight at Diaz. The bullet hits, but only grazes the side of his neck. With that, the advantage quickly shifts. Diaz prepares to fire back, and just as the moment reaches its peak, the story cuts off, leaving everything hanging in suspense. So the moral of the story is never trust a friend who just survived fake Russian roulette and suddenly acts calm. Bro is already negotiating your betrayal package.